Hey everyone, it is Suzanne Worthley back with my co-host Kim Hess. Hey Kim,
Hi.
we're back with another episode of Energy Unleashed. It's the first one of the new year. Oh my gosh, right? Well,
It
it depends
is.
on
Happy
when
New
this
Year.
posts. Yeah,
Happy New
de
Year.
depending on
Yeah.
when it posts, but it's our first one. So Kim and I were talking prior to coming on because we just always chat, to catch up first. And we're sitting here saying how crazy the energy has been. And I think that I would like to share that also with anybody that's a listener in that, the first part of January for me has been super janky. Well, so was December.
December.
Yeah, I've just had a lot going on in the last 6 weeks or so. And I said to Kim, Kim, I don't think it's going to be an easy first quarter. I think it depends on where everybody's at. Each individual is at a different resonance, frequency, vibration, whatever you want to say. And you will kind of like surf the tide accordingly, right? But overall, I think this first quarter, sometimes the first quarter, the trajectory is awesome. And it's like, yeah, right. And then shit can hit the fan or not. But I think we're in the crappy fan right now. So it will be really interesting to see what this whole first quarter kind of plays out like, because I think there's a lot of exhaustion, a
Mhm.
lot of tired. I think there's hopelessness and helplessness. I think that there's a lot of defeatism. I think that there's a lot of really emotional crap going on right now.
I agree. And it has to do a lot with the energy around us, the earth energy, the vibration, the frequencies, all of it. But it also has a lot to do with the chaos around us out in the media. And just I think people either they're really latching on to this election year in a way that is becoming more aggressive.
Mhm.
There's some anger,
Already, yeah.
yeah, already. And I'm like, wow, this is gonna be a tough year for many reasons. And
Yeah.
but like you said, the energy is in a place right now where I feel like it's really pushing us a little bit to continue our growth, continue our path. And if you're not in a good place and you're resistant to that, I think it's going to make it really, really tough.
And
Um,
I agree in this separation of energies also, like, you feel like this, I feel like this, and this is going to be tough for people. And already we have that separation feeling going on. And then we go into a really crappy, like you said, political fight. And it's going to be more and more separation, more and more, you're this, I'm that, we're not the same. And I really hope that people get their big girl, big boy pants on and start to really take self-responsibility and really look at how much do I judge someone else for their belief system? Can't I find a common denominator or just override that and still be, this is something I saw in clients and customers this week in terms of I still have never got over the 2020 situation and who got what as far as medical help that whole thing of I believe in COVID, I don't. I believe in the shots or not. All of that stuff is still raw in people. And I think the first election, last election, 2 elections ago, is still raw in people. We aren't like forgetting in terms of mass
mhm.
humanity. We're not forgetting, much less forgiving. And it's really important, I think, to understand there's good and bad to this. There is a separation of energies because we are owning our own work in our body. We are owning if we're doing our work. We're owning if we're getting rid of triggers. And that's what we're going to talk a little bit more about right now.
Mhm.
If we're doing that work, we're going to be at a different resonance. We're going to, and it
Yeah.
doesn't mean we're better, but we can own our work for gosh sakes, right? So we're going to have a lot of combative things come about because of that. And so this is something to really be aware of and find some, I don't know, empathy, patience, compassion, all of those words.
Yeah, I know. Even just the other night on the news, I just was walking through the room and they said, whatever healthcare system is now requiring masks again. And I'm like, what is
Yeah.
happening? No. And it triggered that it's a PTSD thing of,
Yep.
oh my gosh, I don't think I can go back to that. Like full
Yep.
time. It just, I don't, and I know people appreciate them and there's uses for them, but when they start to put it out in the media like that, I'm like, oh, wow.
It just
Okay, what's
almost takes your
coming?
breath away, right? So what is a trigger? So a trigger is basically something that you hold inside of you in terms of all of your fields. and again, take what resonates on all of our podcasts, but this can be instigated from a memory. It can be an event. It can be an experience. It can be a very personal one, or it can be a collective one. And like we're saying with the COVID situation, the masks, the shots, the this, the that this is huge fear implants that stay in us in terms of our emotional body, first and foremost, but it will trigger into our physical form, and it will definitely play out in the mental form, and it will crush our spirit. And so it's all of our templates, and it will spark such an intense emotional and or physical reaction. When you trigger, it doesn't necessarily have to do with the situation right now. It triggers something from past or potentially even other lifetimes. And so these are really difficult to understand, that then when I trigger, if I don't take care of it immediately and be aware of it, analyze it, discern it, break it down, I will go on to a trajectory that trigger had in my body from before. I haven't cleared anything. I haven't moved forward in anything. And so it's really, really very detrimental to all of our fields.
Yeah, and I think when you talk about that trigger, the physical reaction, the fright or flight or the anger or whatever comes
Yep.
out of that, is so quick,
Yep.
when it comes up, that sometimes you're just clouded in that moment, where it's hard to take that step back and say, wow, why did this just happen?
Yeah.
And
Well, and even just noticing it happened. I mean,
yeah.
not even to the extent of wow yet. It's just like, oh my God, that's a trigger. I mean,
Mhm.
like something just happened to me that isn't my so-called normal. It just
Mhm.
switched. And it's like a light switch. It's an intense change in all of the fields. And so that's when you know that it's something embedded. So this is also the first video that we've done since I fell and broke my wrist. So I fell and had a really bad crash on the 17th of December. And I was walking, and I did an Instagram on it the other day, because I think it's so important for us to understand our boots can get stuck together with our shoelace and our little hook. And that's what happened. I caught myself on my own boot, and I took a massive spill and crushed a bunch of bones. This has triggered so much that I wasn't aware of. So this has been a really great lesson for me. Not that it's my favorite kind of lesson, mind you, but I found myself getting wheeled into ER, and I literally was like already excruciating pain, but my brain was like on overload from my last couple of years of having some incidents with mercury and poisoning and hospitals and protocols, and I wasn't even as concerned about this as my brain was completely a year and a half ago. And I think this is so weird how the body can store that is one amazing thing, but how the body can retrieve that,
Right,
that's
right
what's
away.
really weird.
Yeah, trauma sits weird. It's not easy,
No. And
to
then
handle.
I was in the hospital for mercury during COVID. So then the COVID stuff, like you said, started to come back.
Right.
And I'm like, oh my gosh. And now you're saying the news is bringing up COVID and everyone's starting to wear masks again. So our triggers are always popping up like, you know what it reminds me of? Do you remember that really funny game where you play in some kid lands where you smash the frog and they pop up and you smash it with a hammer? Did you ever play that silly game?
Well, I played whack-a-mole, but I don't
Yeah,
know
that's what it is.
if
Whack-a-mole.
whack-a-mole.
Yeah, but it's a mole, not a frog. And that's how triggers are for me. It's like, whoop, there I
Yep,
am, whoop, there I
yep.
am, and you want to smack it down because it's not like, I don't want to do that, but then they just pop up over here, right?
Yeah,
It reminds me of that silly little game.
yeah,
So, yeah, I think this is such a difficult thing to navigate because it's unexpected.
yeah, it is. And it's hard because you become hard on yourself,
Hmm.
when you realize that it's like, why did I fall into that again?
Right.
Why did I let that, like, immediately react throughout my body
And
and
I,
react
I,
to it?
I think it changes our perspective on life totally. Now, I'm literally 64 years old and have never had surgery ever in my life until this happened.
Mhm.
And for me to go through that massive thing, I'm now acting like I'm a freaking 100 years old when I stepped outside this morning to start my car to warm it up. there's literally this much snow on the ground in Minnesota,
Yeah, but it's
and
slippery.
I'm walking like an old lady going, okay, this is the scene of the crime where I took the big digger, right? And I'm walking like I'm 110, and I'm like, do not limit your brain and your body and succumb to this fear either. I mean, not that I'm not going to walk carefully, but my, I guess, invitation to people is energetically invite yourself to push through it. Invite yourself to say, yeah, but I can walk. I am fine. I don't want to not live life to the fullest extent, not doing things stupidly or ignorantly, obviously, but not taking risks and chances, but don't limit the life either, saying, oh my gosh, I can't
Right,
in case
right.
I get hurt.
Yeah, and I'm curious about, like you said, like we talked about the media talking about masks and just COVID's been going around before the holidays and all the things, that people start to stay home again by themselves out of reaction to this, which it's been hard for people to get back out, many people to be out socially and really get past some of that.
Mhm.
That fear is really, it's really embedded,
It is. It's a PTC. It's a post-traumatic COVID stress syndrome. It literally is.
a new code.
I have a new acronym for the medical field. But it is, and I have watched numerous clients over the last 3 years really struggle with triggering from the whole isolation situation.
Mhm,
And reentry is what we call that.
mhm,
And it is at the point where people are having the courage to reenter. And then that's exactly when they'll slap the program in again. Now it's like, now you got to be scared again. So,
mhm,
but I think what's even scarier is when they're embedded in your fascia, almost like it's a reaction of the physical form. I was coming around going down my steps, and I have a 2-floor home, and I was at the top of my steps, and I looked down, and immediately I'm like, oh, this could happen, that could happen. Those are really weird things that
mhm.
weren't there a month ago. And how our brain just takes over and creates those is amazing to me. But I also think it's imperative that in order for us to heal and move forward, we take command of those. We don't let those what ifs get in the way and create the reality trajectory. It's not right. It's
Well,
important for us to step in and say, well, what if, but it isn't right now. So you're okay. you know?
well, it's an interesting because you say your mind is creating this, right? But
Mhm.
it's stuck in your fascia,
Body. Yeah.
So can you talk a little bit more about
Well,
that?
your fascia is like, when you pull the chicken off, chicken skin off, and it's that white gooby stuff. And we have that as well. And a lot of the emotion I find in my clients is stuck in the fascia. And that's why fascia release, a massage, body movement period is really good for emotional release. And just to move, and even rehab. Think about it. I mean, this has been so stiff because it was in a cast. My whole point is I have to move all day long. I'm moving, moving, moving because we have to get not only the body to come back with memory, but we also want to move that energy through.
Mhm,
Stuck energy is when we get sick. Just like I was stuck in a cast, I was stuck in a sling, I was stuck. We want to move all of that stuff through the body. And the fear does the same thing. The fear stays in the actual body, not just in the place where you're hurt, but more so in here. So it's important for us to be aware and watching. And I'm standing at the top of the steps going, holy bananas, how did that just pop in my head? I've walked down these steps for 36 years and I've never thought of falling.
yeah,
Where did that come from?
yeah,
Right? So challenging the brain, I think, is important, and not being silly or irresponsible again. I mean, of course, I'm going to hang on to the rail a little bit harder right now, which is fine. But
mhm,
it's also important to look back and go, yeah, but look at how, my daughter was beautiful last night. She's like, Mom, I know you were really freaking out about a lot of this. She said, but look at how fast you're healing. She said, you're healing so fast because of the work that I do on myself as well. And she said, don't not trust your body. Look at how quickly you're bouncing back. And I'm like, we're an amazing vehicle. I mean, we can slice open 2 some inches, put a plate and screws in there, and in 2 weeks, it's completely healed. I mean, the stitch, the seam,
yeah,
the
right,
seam. That's what I mean. Now, of course, everything else has time to heal. But my
yeah,
point is, we slice open skin, and in 2 weeks, we're phenomenally
mhm,
incredible healers. And yet our brain will trigger so much trauma that we limit our healing capability.
mhm.
And I think that's the really big point of this message is I've watched people trigger from childhood,
Mhm.
you know? My
What
client
happens?
yesterday would,
I mean, think about family and
yeah,
trauma, of family and all the things. There's absolutely, I can go 2 years and all of a sudden my sister will say something specific and I'm like, what? Like it just totally triggers that reaction. That was a long time ago.
if she says that, how far back did you go? Do you remember? Like if she said something, did you go back to being 5 or 2 or
It was it was like being probably like 6, 5,
yep,
6 in
yep.
that time frame.
That's a huge trigger point too in
Yeah.
our psychological growth period, emotional growth period, 5, 6, 7, right in there. The client yesterday was triggering and talking and triggering, and her whole emotional changed as she's telling the story. And she's a couple years older than I am, and she was talking about an alcoholic father and how they had to walk on eggshells, and
Mm,
how much she was aware as a 6 year old, had to be aware and read the room constantly for all the signs to see if she was safe or not.
right.
And that is a embedded trigger that she still does as a preservation technique or a protection mechanism all these 60 years later. You know,
Right.
she'll read the room energetically and suck into everything and everybody and every, ounce of everything to see if she's safe. And
Mhm.
that's such a waste of energy.
Oh, it's so hard to live with that way in that
Yeah.
fear. I mean, yeah.
So,
Looking for those kinds of behaviors, and when you see them in other people, I'm sure it triggers her from childhood. Like,
yep.
wow. Yeah.
And I know this woman quite well, and I do see how she does this a lot. Like she'll read the room. It's just an automatic response. But the exhaustion of the energy that's pushing that is, you know, ridiculous. And she doesn't even really know she does it. So I'm sure the question is how do we get rid of a trigger?
Yes. That's the big question. Tell us, Suzanne.
Watch this. I don't know. No, I, I honestly, from a practitioner standpoint, I don't think that there is a number one answer because I don't know your reaction, his reaction, her reaction, their reaction to their trigger and why it's happening, et cetera, et cetera. But I will give some blanket advice. I think the very first thing is to be to be aware that A, triggers are a thing. B, I probably most likely have triggers, and then be aware and being present enough to identify that, holy crap, I just triggered.
Mhm.
And I think the red flags for true triggering are first and foremost, the physical intense reaction. And
Yeah,
it's
I
intense.
agree because that when you feel that rush or that escalation inside your body,
Mhm.
that's when I've been taking a deep breath and kind of even taking a physical step back
Yep.
before I actually react because I was so quick to react and get emotional and teary or whatever was, coming through that taking that step back makes a huge difference because you're acknowledging that it's happening and your
And
mind now is thinking about what it is, you
what
know.
you're doing is you're circumventing a panic attack, by the way.
Hmm.
Because a lot of people that don't take that step back, Kim, and be present in that moment are already doing this. They're already like in the motion of, oh my God, loss of control, loss of control. And it can escalate right into a panic attack.
Mm.
So have you ever had a panic attack?
Once on
Yeah.
the when yeah, it was interesting. I was working. It was earlier in my management career, and I had a leader in the company that wanted me to say and do something that I did not believe in.
Mm.
And I sat in the meeting and it was time to talk about it. And I said, I can't do this. And I went in the bathroom and had a huge panic attack because it went against everything in my integrity and beliefs. Um, and it all worked out okay, but that was the only time I've had one.
That's amazing. Yeah.
Yeah.
So do you recall the physical attributes that supported the panic attack, like what it
Yeah,
felt?
I wasn't breathing very well.
Yep.
So when I left the room and went to the bathroom, I was actually gasping for air. And then it turned into total emotional tears, shaking.
Okay.
But my heart was racing, it was a full physical
Yep.
reaction.
Yep. Yep. Yeah, I've only had a couple, and again, only during the time of Mercury is when mine happened, and that was all new for me because my fight or flight system and my whole nervous system, electrical system was off the charts because of the brain poisoning stuff.
Mhm.
And I didn't know how a panic attack even felt. And it does. It feels like all of those. The only thing that I'll add in from mine was I felt like I was going out of my body. I wasn't even in my body and I didn't know where I was going. Whereas when I'm going out of my body, typically when I'm meditating or doing work, I'm in command of where my body's going out. And I love that feeling. But when you're panicking, that's not a good feeling.
Mm.
And so it can
No.
be a closing in kind of feeling, like claustrophobic, at the same time of being sucked out. And it's terrifying. And I've only done it like twice. But when this happened, I had a nerve block that went through my whole arm. And it was only my second night home, and my whole family was gone at a concert. And I was just chilling, watching Netflix, and the nerve blocker thing was still there. It was the
Mm.
first night after. And I had like a corpse arm, and I don't know why that just freaked me out. And I like couldn't feel my arm at all. And it would flop and do these weird things if I wasn't careful. And I'm like, I have no control. This isn't my body. Where's my body? Where's my body? And in 2 seconds, I was freaking out and triggering from, oh my God, I can't help my body. And all of that old stuff from my poisoning came up, and I was losing my mind. And thank God for my daughter. I called her on the phone and she literally talked me down. So what we can do to talk ourselves out of not just a panic attack, but also the actual trigger is a couple of things. Step back, take the breath, like you said. Also, change your paradigm, change your viewpoint. If I'm in the living room, get up, walk to the kitchen if you can. Get a different viewpoint where you're doing something. If you can, use your body. Start to stick your hands under some water so that you're back in your physical form again. Start to do the connection to the physical body. And I think that's why this was so scary, because I couldn't connect anything. And it's important for us to take command of the trigger and start to go, oh, this may be really terrifying right now, but most of this is coming from a different timeline.
Mm.
This
Yeah, or
isn't
a
my,
different experience or
yep, this
whatever it
isn't
is.
my
Yeah.
current timeline,
Mhm.
right? Yeah, and find as best as you can how to tear apart and dissect down. That's this experience in the timeline that I had.
Mhm.
This is the experience in a different timeline I'm having right now. Even though they seem similar because I'm triggering, they're two technically different things. This is done. It has no control over me, but it does if you let it get here.
It does.
So
Yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
they're amazingly difficult, and yet at the same time, I think it's important for us to go into them and invite them to transmute or leave or dissipate or however.
That's what I was gonna say is that because I've worked really hard to try and release it around forgiveness for myself, forgiveness for, and to bring it forward and actually just let it, go
Mhm.
back to the Akashic records or where it needs to go because it is so embedded though. There's layers of it that you don't
Yes.
realize. It's layers and layers. And so I've made so much progress. And then when it came up again, I'm like, how did that happen?
And then you're pissed
I
at
already
yourself.
dealt with
Yep.
this.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Let's go back to my client, however, the one that has this memory of 60 years ago of walking on eggshells, being a child because dad would come home intoxicated. And the forgiveness piece is also important here, in that if we want to do soul contract work and Akashic work, it's important, if we choose, to go into the concept of my dad gets to be an alcoholic,
Mhm.
and I don't change that, even if I think I'm changing it by being quiet and not letting the eggshells break. I really didn't change it. So now that I'm an adult, I can let that go and almost release his contract, his choice of a contract.
Mhm.
Okay. That contract even goes further in most cases of a scenario like that, in that my mother is probably a codependent. So I also have a trauma trigger that says mom should have helped me or made me safe or protected me. So there's a whole lot of strings attached, energetically corded in trigger situations. And so the more work that I choose or not to do in terms of these soul contracts, releasing the fact that this was what I signed up for in some regards, this is what I feel still is unjust in what I signed up for, et cetera, et cetera. If I break all that stuff down and really do that work, in some way, shape, or form, it does wiggle into the so-called fascia or where those pockets of trauma are. It
Mm.
doesn't 100% release it, but it definitely breaks it down.
Okay.
Does that make sense that that's an angle to work on?
It is, and that there are multiple angles.
Oh,
It's so difficult to,
yeah.
it's not easy to
Yeah.
identify it and just let it go. It like you said, it's layers and angles, and yeah, it makes sense though to let.
Now I'm going to unleash it even higher and bigger and weirder just for one moment, because like, why not? In terms of, I was on a vacation solo for my 60th years ago, and I went to, I don't remember what park it was. It was like Zion or one of those national parks. Pulled across the way and looked at something, and the rock formation, I stared at it. I'm all by myself in the middle of nowhere. It was a beautiful, gorgeous day. There was nothing stressful happening. And I lost all of a sudden my mind. I was having like this panic of another place in space, not Earth, a different, for me, very
Mm,
alien, very, very, oh my God, I know this place. And whatever happened at that place was very, very emotionally disturbing.
mhm.
And I went right into this whole like, oh my God, what is happening? Now, my logical Suzanne 3D human brain on Earth is going, what are you doing? And the actual off planet, other lifetime galactic memory was clear as a bell. So these two were just crashing. And I sat there like, I have lost my mind. And again, this is the same premise. It's bringing yourself back to this concept of, Suzanne, look down at your own body. You're a human right now. That's not your lifetime. Get back in your timeline.
Mhm.
Okay. Because we can instantly, and this is going to happen more and more. Not everybody's galactic, but you can shove yourself into an 1800s timeline.
Yeah, yeah, because everything's thinner now. Like the
Yeah.
veils are thinner. It's bound to happen.
And
Yeah.
that galactic one has happened to me, I can probably say 6 different times in different scenarios. And one of them was the Mercury, when all of the hazmat came out and they were in those big white suits like ET. I just broke into hysteria and started freaking out in my car, and they wouldn't let me near my home. And I was having all these triggers go from, oh my God, I remember getting kicked out of my home when I was 6 when something happened. And oh my God, and it was multiple triggers, and it was insane.
Yeah.
So we're an amazing, supercomputer of events, memories, and experiences from not only this lifetime, but multiple lifetimes. And it's important for us to stay in command of being in charge of your own hard drive, right? I mean,
Right,
that's our
right.
job.
Well, yeah, it's being a human with all of that going on is, yeah, it is our job to
It's
really
really
pull
hard
it
though.
out, take a look at it, and figure out how to move it on.
And I encourage people, because not everyone goes to galactic or lifetimes that aren't planetary here, but there's probably enough listeners that can identify with the fact of, you're not going to make sense of it.
Mm,
So stop worrying about making sense of it. It's a little easier to make sense of the concept of, yeah, maybe I was, a Native American, or maybe I was an indigenous person, or maybe I was a cowboy. I can get all that. But when you're really triggering because you're seeing a structure that's a bridge design and you're losing your ever loving mind and it makes no sense,
yeah.
it's important for you, in my opinion, to still do all of those steps to de-escalate, but please don't hang on to the concept of A, I'm crazy, or B, I have to make sense of this, because neither of those really are true either.
No, and I think when you hang on to it that way, I mean, that can take you into a whole, like you said, anxiety is one of the things, but depression, other things, when you start to think you're really crazy,
Yeah.
it takes you down a whole nother level of emotional stress that, you may not need to do. It's
And I will warn people with past life situations when we trigger, that is not your current life. And you can go into a full depression, like you said, with a sense of responsibility for something that happened that didn't go well.
Mhm.
And that is not you. I have a couple of clients, one in specific that I've worked with for years, who still triggers all of the time from past life situations where she takes huge amounts of responsibility for really traumatic events. So it's trauma that
Mm,
instigates trauma. Okay. But these are two completely different timelines in incarnations. That is not acceptable for this one to take the hit for this one. But if we don't do the work to dissect that down and release that, we can transfer that super easy.
Well, you would take some of that on here, like even, does that turn into almost a manifestation of it happening again? Like
Sure,
you
for
bring it
sure,
in, you
because
hold it, you're holding on to it so tight that wouldn't it like
draw it in.
draw that vibration, that type of thing to you?
Yep.
Oh boy, that's a
So
lot.
there again, the universe of the law of attraction, the universal law of attraction is not your best friend when you are working in that regard.
Right.
This is why it's critical for us to, this is why as a practitioner, I have a hard time with people that are totally all about past lives. Like, I want to know, I want to know. Well, that isn't your incarnation right here. You're incarnated right here, right now for a reason, right?
Mm-hmm.
Take the information, read it like a PDF file, but you don't have to incorporate it, right?
Right. Yeah.
So yeah, these are triggers are really, really difficult. And I wanted to bring it up right now because obviously, because I've been dealing with it a lot, but also I think in my opinion, these are going to come faster and quicker because of these thinning of the lines again. Our literal dimensional planes of existence are getting so interpenetrated that it's easy for us to slip out into another timeline. And that can be disorienting enough,
Mm-hmm.
much less take on the emotion of the trigger of that. Or the trigger itself can pop you to the timeline.
Right. Gosh.
Yeah.
Well, here we go, 2024.
Yeah. And remember, you said a really good thing at the beginning of this to even unleash a little farther. You said we're in a crappy political year. They're already doing the COVID thing. Don't underestimate that they're going to use this kind of like, I don't want to say this is a vulnerability of the human, but it kind of is.
It is.
We're vulnerable to this stuff.
Yeah.
The negative agenda will use purposeful triggering to
Mm-hmm.
incite fear to
Mm-hmm.
actually herd the masses. And this is really critical for us to understand. And as we progress into 2024, when we're having this bifurcation again, this stretching of your vibrations here, mine's here, it isn't a value system. I'm not better or worse. It just is what it is. Honor that. But find patience with somebody who's absolutely freaking out and scared to death about absolutely everything. I mean, the stories I hear as a practitioner, I mean, people's lives are ruined because, you believe this and I believe that.
Right. Right. So how do you ever get back to, with that type of response and behavior, ever get back to, we should be kind to each other and we should be more about love and we should be supporting each other and all of the, it doesn't, it doesn't lend to that when you're
Well, first
standing.
of all, the word that you used 3 times or 2 times at least in there was should. We should this, we should that,
Should.
we should this. That is still in the program of I'm broken, you're broken, we can't, we are told, all of that
Mhm.
limitation. When we finally start to step up and go, no, I'm not choosing that. I'm not, it's not that I get to choose to. I'm going to take control of that. I'm going to take my sovereignty back. That's the tipping point.
Mhm.
So if we're still in the should mentality, we're in a fear base. If we're in the I get to and I'm choosing this, then we're back into a love base. But that doesn't mean that there's ever going to be kumbaya at the end. There's a lot of relationships that will no longer ever work again because that's part of the contract right now is to just,
Yeah, I get
separate
it.
that stuff.
I know it. It's hard to do that.
It is hard.
Yeah, it
And I
is.
think triggers are piss me off sometimes, to tell you the truth, because like you said earlier, also you get 10 steps ahead and you think, I thought I already did
Did
that.
this.
I've done
Why do I
that
have to do it
asinine
again?
thing 5 times now. What is going on? Yeah. In fact, you said it earlier. What is happening here? I love when
I
you do
know.
that one. That's one of
Why did
Kim's
it?
famous
Why?
one of Kim's famous lines. What is happening here? So, why is it happening again? Well, that is an opportunity to either find deeper. And I mean, I was amazed and floored when I was doing some work on myself the other day that I still had so much in me that I thought that I had come to terms with in the last year and a half to
Mhm.
two. Nope. I'm still as human as anybody else and terrified that my body is not going to, support me and help me and save me and protect me and on it goes. And the reality is my daughter was brilliant. She's like, Mom, look at how fast that's changed. Look at what you've done. Like, so we need to stay here in
Mhm.
a heartfelt way, not here in a way.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
I
it's a
love that.
lot.
But it's a, yeah, it is. But it's
And
good.
it's exhausting. And we were just saying the whole first trajectory quarter is unstable.
It is. I think the whole year is going to be difficult, but this first quarter, I think it's really pushing us to evaluate things within ourselves, to release certain things. I think it'll make it easier for us to get through the remainder of the year if we do take that care within ourselves.
Yep.
And but yeah, it feels like it's really pushing from my perspective, like
Yeah.
do your stuff, do your stuff.
Do your work, do your work, do your work. Awesome. Well, okay. Any questions other than that? You think we covered that pretty well for folks?
I think so.
All right.
Triggers come up in almost every conversation that we have, I think. So to go over what it is and how you can work with them is really important. I think it's
And
good.
most of all, notice it is an intense change. It's an intense coming on. It's not like, oh, it's eking on over the last 3 hours. This is like boom. And
Boom.
I change and I am in it and I am in it to win it, either to win it, meaning it's going to take me down or I'm going to take it out. So it's important for us to command ourselves and really support another. Like my daughter's supporting me that night because I was all alone and I was scared and I was basically still on pharmaceutical drugs as well. So I
Hey,
probably
that didn't
used,
help anything.
yeah. Let's leave mom home. So, yeah. So it's important, I think, to be able to be there for one another. And somebody can't get me out of my trigger, but they can certainly talk me through it. And that was
Mhm.
really helpful. So be a friend if indeed you can.
Oh
So,
yeah, that can calm things down very quickly where you can actually think through what's
yeah,
happening. So
yeah, yeah.
yeah, that's
Cool.
really good.
All right. Well, good luck, everybody, triggering this first quarter. And if you choose to like this video, share this video, subscribe, follow, anything to help us out to get the message out. We're here for you as much as possible. And please send us comments or individual, messages of what you want to hear from us, because that's what we're here for, right?
Exactly.
All
Yeah,
right.
this is fun.
Until next time, Kaz or Cugs.
Goodbye.